we'll take general discussion if that's okay. We've got about 15 minutes before the session ends. So first of all, if there are any, thanks Robert, you really sort of wrapped it up very well. So we'll see if anyone has any questions, any comments. Please go ahead. We can see each other now. Emily Banks. Do you want? There's a microphone coming. Oh, there's a microphone there.
Thank you very much to all the speakers. I found that really interesting and really focusing attention on what needs to happen next. I had the experience of speaking at the World Economic Forum in Davos, and they have a bit of a health presence there alongside 300 heads of state and various other things. It's a pretty interesting environment for a public health person. There were not very many public health people there. And I talked quite a bit about smoking. I said, you're the World Economic Forum. You could actually just decide. You could say, we're in this position now where we've got 1 billion smokers, more than 10% of deaths worldwide. We're here because we've basically, as a society, somewhere decided that people's right to trade is more important than health. You, as the World Economic Forum, could do something about it. And the main response was, we're a bit bored by that. We're a bit bored about smoking. It's a bit boring. Have you been to the session on artificial intelligence and nanobots? That's fantastic. So I actually think that one of the issues we have is, first of all, the people who are in those circles, because of our success in tobacco control in a lot of places, they're not day-to-day exposed to people who are dying from smoking-related diseases, but also there is a general feeling that it's been going on for a long time. And I just wonder if there are any suggestions from the panel for how to overcome this boredom factor.
Panel, please. Robert.
Well, thank you, Emily. Yes, I've heard that too. We've done tobacco. Let's do obesity. Let's do childhood obesity. And it's exactly the same conversation I have with my son. And I think we can be imaginative in the ways that we reframe the tobacco unresolved issues. And the thing that I'm thinking about very carefully and with some help in New Zealand is, well, the health system is under pressure. Reducing smoking rates today will be beneficial for the health system tomorrow in terms of reduced admissions and dollar savings. So, and we haven't used that economic argument, and World Smoke-Free Day this year, 31st of May, is on tobacco as a development issue, which will appeal to other constituencies. So those of us who are committed to tobacco control, and it doesn't ever seem to go away from one's personal idiosyncrasies, I think we have to be imaginative, vociferous, and be opportunistic. That may not be helpful, but it's my immediate response, Emily.
Does anyone else have any? Does anyone in the audience have any? I can see you. There's some big experts in the audience. I don't know whether anyone wants to comment on that, because it is something that's raised, and Australia has managed by all sorts of ways to make smoking quite interesting in the last few years with all these, with the plain packaging. I mean, that's quite a discussion point, and has, I think, I mean, a lot of other countries are very envious of what was done here, and I think it did raise awareness again about tobacco. So does anyone want to say? No?
I do. Oh, sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm not a big person, but I come from New Zealand as well, but I have worked in tobacco control for a long time, and I've really noticed that it's been quite an interesting thing. In the early days, it was a kind of activist thing. People were really engaged with it. We were up against something. And it's interesting to note how, as it's become more of a government goal and in the mainstream, a lot of those activists have sort of dropped away. And yet what's happened with the government picking it up is it's been focused very much on cessation as opposed to the public health side of things. And yeah, I suppose that's just really a comment. It was interesting when you asked that question, though, because it was the same question I was going to ask. How do we reinvigorate it?
Yeah. Mike Darrell, please. Mike has been behind a lot of the activities that have gone on in Australia. If you don't know, you probably all know more than I do.
Thanks, and I'd just like to point out for the record that I am taller than Emily. Just. Look, I think briefly, and I think Robert mentioned this, there's always a danger of complacency. And we've seen that. You achieve something. We achieved an ad ban in the early 1990s, and we sort of sat back, and then we realised we had to get going again. And politicians can also get enormously complacent. We've done tobacco, now let's do something else. On a slightly more reassuring theme, though, as I'm saying tomorrow, in 1973, the science editor of the Sun newspaper in London said to me, "You know, Mike, you'll never find anything new to say about smoking." And we've been finding new things to say about smoking ever since. There are all kinds of new ways of presenting the evidence. There's new evidence, and people like Emily and others have been presenting that, and new ways of getting that evidence across. So I think we've absolutely got to continue being creative in our approaches. I do worry a bit that, but it's a point that Robert made as well, that there are so many different issues that we run the risk of not prioritising tobacco, and it shouldn't be competitive. You know, tobacco's important, alcohol's important, and so on. But we've got to keep that push up on tobacco, and we've got to keep hammering it home in different ways, and we need to find new generations of activists.
But there's nothing so consistent as the effects of tobacco right around the world. There's someone up there who had a comment. No, you've got to keep inventing ways. But next comment.
Thank you. Hi, it's me again, Ashton. Hello, Robert. In regards to the creativity comment, I did some work in a small island, Pacific island, called Tokelau, and I didn't actually need to be too creative there. Just some simple conversations. We managed to consult with the whole of the 3 atolls, which is about 1,500 people, and they were extremely enthusiastic in trying to garner assistance to compete with tobacco in their country. And so I guess from that one experience in a exceptional community, I guess geographically, is that if you're speaking to people on the ground who are affected by this, it's actually quite a simple message. They obviously have the issue of addiction that they need to battle with, but I found it very positive, and we've actually been able last year in November to get some very interesting legislation through.
Valerie, I've been thinking about that question. Thank you, Ashton. And I don't think it's a secret, but Tokelau has determined that it will be smoke-free by 2020. And they have some particular attributes which will make that easier. I think that coming back to this question of so-called boredom, I think there are plenty of other avenues for taking our message forwards, and there are other departments of the government apparatus that we can be working with. And I've been encouraging recently the Department of Conservation to think about what a smoke-free society would mean for their enormous reserves of lands, apart from the Great Walks. I've been talking to the Defence Force about what it would mean if the Defence Force in New Zealand became smoke-free. And I think there are other avenues. And I know I hate to use this word, particularly in Mike's presence, but I think the debate about e-cigarettes is an opportunity to refocus that narrow discussion about what else needs to be done to support cessation and to make sure that population approaches. And the third thing I say, there's still scope for building coalitions with other voices around this topic.
I think if you look in the well-off countries, the high-income countries, in general, smoking rates are going down everywhere, and they are, as Mike says, there's a lot to be not enthusiasm, but a lot of gains that are visible. And I think also just even a percent decline in smoking is a lot of people who will be saved, and there's all the new evidence about how quickly and how effective stopping is in terms of health outcomes. So there's nothing wrong with a 1 or 2% decline a year. It's actually very good, and I think we should possibly not be so have such high expectations. And until recent, then if you turn to low income is tricky. That's largely Africa. But if you look in middle income countries in India, and I think in China, I understand that a lot of the work that you guys have been doing, and equally big cohort studies in China, where you start to estimate deaths and say there's 1 million deaths in India caused by smoking, isn't that's about the number, and about 1 million in China too. And those sorts of estimates are getting through to the population, and I believe in China and India has smoking rates. Are they starting to go down in India?
We haven't done that. No, we did this study 20 years ago. At that time, it was 35%. Prevalence among those aged 35 plus is 35%.
Yeah.
Now we have some tobacco control activities, so we feel it has come down. We don't see people smoking on the roads or in the bus or on the train. Everything's stopped now.
So I think
It's going
rates
down,
uh,
but we
ra-
don't know how much.
Yeah, so smoking, just publicity and individual countries. And I think what Emily mentioned, just although in some ways what you found in Australia was not new, was exactly the same as in other countries. But these were the data that you published were the first data on actually what smoking does in Australia, published in Australia, and it had a big impact. And I think the work that you've done in India and so forth, just keeping on repeating in different settings that, it's true here too, it's true in this country, it's true in that country, and people are, there is and politicians and other people do take note. And I showed that increase in Russia and the alcohol-related mortality. Well, Putin actually has raised the price of alcohol, and the death rates have come down. I mean, it does, there's some benefit, so that he didn't like seeing those figures so much. So I think one probably underestimates how influential local publicity can be, and local evidence, and I will say local epidemiological evidence. So the epidemiologist amongst you should not think that it's not worth repeating something that someone else has done in another setting and saying, that's this idea, you've got to do something novel and interesting. The repetition of the same finding, particularly for smoking, but for alcohol as well, the repetition of findings in different countries, and the drawing attention in the media to the findings that are local are very powerful.
Can I add one thing?
Enrique, you've got
No,
to
just.
into the microphone.
I think this one is
Okay.
working. Just a figure. We don't have nothing to compare with, but during the last decade in Angola, as a business, the tobacco industry increased 400%.
Yes, that is true, and it's also, I think, in Malawi, a lot of African countries do produce
Angola is not producing.
cigarettes.
It's not a
I mean,
producer.
what?
Angola has no plantation. It's just the trading of.
Are you saying sales of tobacco have
Yeah.
increased? Well, you need your cohort study to be published and emphasized. This is the point that, attention, you need to draw attention to these things. Although it is true to say that in Africa, smoking rates are low, and it does take decades for the harmful effects really to build up. But nevertheless, it's not too late. And I think Ragland's findings in Australia, although it's well known, I think they just should emphasize that there needs to be in the Indigenous community really serious attempts to do something about smoking rates. Sorry.
Thanks to all the speakers. So I particularly wanted to ask about, to ask Gadja about the vital registration, because that's particularly in settings like India and Africa, capturing, even death, causes of death, incident events like stroke, like Alison discussed. Are there improvements in that setting? And then also, seeing as so much of the discussion seems to be about tobacco, I was hoping to ask, well, particularly Robert, but other people on the panel might have questions as well, about, you know, that economic argument. You know, in the UK, for example, everything's become very focused on trying to, you know, a return of investment in 5 years, for example, you know, in terms of the electoral cycle. You know, I'm sure there's other countries in the world where there's that, where people are trying to like push, you know, bang for buck in terms of things. And one, you know, I completely agree that tobacco is almost the #1 public health priority, but because of that long lag time and the immediacy, I just wonder if there's other ways to get some of those messages across.
Regarding death registration, so in metro cities, it is almost 99.9% complete. But when you look at the rural areas, it's only 40 to 50% complete. And then the cause of death. So especially for the external causes, like suicides and other causes, you don't get, they don't write on the death certificates for majority of them because they are medico-legal. And in Mumbai, the cause of death return of death certificate is very good because it is done, reviewed by some other person and then comes to the registry. That is very good. But in other places, we need verbal autopsy to arrive at the diagnosis. So that is why now we implemented our verbal autopsy method all over India so that we get cause-specific deaths for the country.
Okay, I think it's probably time to wrap up and to thank everyone. I was just going to add really an answer to your question. When Robert said there are 3 things the politician asks, I was surprised. I had a 4th because I thought you were going to say, and will this help me get re-elected? Because I always thought that was quite an important question. And really getting people to stop smoking is actually one of the fastest effects in terms of improving health. So, I mean, that is something one can say. But I do thank everyone for I certainly thank the speakers. I think they gave very excellent and you know, illuminating talks about different issues and around the world. And I thank you all for participating in the discussion, so thank you.